welcome. You're listening to Quick Take. I'm Susie Tomachuk, along with my amazing co-host, James Capps. How are you, James?
I'm fantastic, Susie. Super excited for today's episode. We've got some fun people here with us.
We do. I just wish my name started with J because then I would fit right in. But
That's a fact.
we have our good friend, Jacob Warwick, with us today. How are you, Jacob?
Apparently, I'm good people. I'm doing well.
You are.
Yeah,
I'm happy to be here. I'm good people. That's nice.
Yeah, well, not everybody knows you. Most everybody knows you. But tell us a little bit about what you do. And you're pretty much a rock star in the area that you lead. So tell us about your business.
I'll try to be as humble as possible after that intro. Good people, rock star. Some would call me the goat.
I have faith in you. You can find some humility in there. I think.
I'll find something there. Ultimately, I'm a interview and negotiation coach for seven-figure earners, which tend to be high net worth individuals, executives. I recently broke into working with some Hollywood agents, which has totally changed the way I think about negotiation in a lot of ways. And obviously those deal sizes are much bigger and interesting. So happy to share some of the insight that I've picked up over the last 15 years or so.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess one question before you give us some of that wisdom is that a mindset shift? Like, how do people deal with the fact, like what goes around being able to say, I'm worthy of this number?
Yeah, I think it really is a mindset shift. But I think maybe more so, it's just the type of opportunity you put yourself in. So there are situations where you'll negotiate just as hard for a low paying job as you would for $1 million job or more, or a $20 million contract. The nuances aren't really that different. It's just that you've put yourself in a stronger opportunity. If you're working for a no-name startup or you're negotiating with Google, it's obviously a lot more juice to squeeze at Google than the alternative. So it's just as much work, but you have to put yourselves in the right type of room to have the opportunity to start to have those bigger value-based conversations.
But I'm also hearing you saying a lot of those tactics, the approaches, the mindset, it's really almost deal agnostic. That you need to really put yourself in the best position and do the certain things because at the end of the day, it's about what you want out of the situation.
Yeah, it's almost annoyingly deal agnostic. I'll work with sometimes chief technology officers and they say, well, how much engineering experience do you have? And I ask why it's relevant.
Right.
What I want to know is how much does that company you're hiring or you're interviewing for, how much do they value engineering? We're going to find out. Don't tell them how much they should value. Have them tell you what they value at. And then that's how we break some pretty big comp bands.
Great example.
That is something to really think about. So one thing that people will probably always ask you, what are the biggest mistakes people make?
Yeah, I guess we were talking in the green room ahead of time that we were specifically talking around some job transitions and what happens. And more specifically for executives, they tend to put a lot of overemphasis on LinkedIn, like LinkedIn is going to be their savior. And oftentimes the advice that works for executives is contrarian to the advice that works at middle management. If you overshare on LinkedIn, that triggers to me and sometimes to recruiters that you have a lot of tactical stuff to share. That starts to position you down as like a director and sometimes a lower level VP because you have so much to talk about. That information can and will be used against you in a negotiation, whether you like it or not. For example, I've led a team of 200. Oh, that's too bad. We needed someone that's led a team of 300. They're not qualified. Or somebody wants to lead a smaller team, but they said, hey, I led a team of 200. Why would they ever consider this opportunity? It's too much information they shared. So if you follow the advice of LinkedIn gurus, they'll often tell you, fill it all out, do it all. And I was guilty of this. James knows. We played around with his profile a little bit on some of this. And then we found out that the higher up you go in the food chain, the less information you should share on LinkedIn because it leaves more things open-ended for you to control later. You actually turn off opportunities. And sometimes it's as simple as, I'm a VP at big name company here. Do you really need to ask what that's about? Because if you know, you know. And if you do know, that's when you're going to reach out to me. So you don't have to go into a lot of specifics. Then in other cases, you can't go into specifics because of confidentiality. So if you're just totally faking it, you can always hide behind a confidentiality clause and say, I honestly can't discuss the top secret crap we were doing here. Right. So I think a lot of people overemphasize LinkedIn as their savior when sometimes you should just pick up the phone, call Susie, call someone like James. They're going to open doors for you much faster than you trying to screw around with your LinkedIn profile for weeks on end.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I love that contrarian approach to it, because that's exactly right. That, we are kind of, as you go through your career, you focus so heavily on your resume and you want to get that all, articulated and detailed out. And then to really be at this point in your career to say, look, less is more. That's a really interesting point of view.
Yeah. You know what the other thing I always get from people that are in a role right now and they are thinking about moving on and they're in that executive level is, do I open up that button that says I'm open to opportunities? And they have such a mindset shift
Don't put the
around.
green circle. Don't do it.
So don't do it.
No, I mean that is a surefire way to just totally broadcast to the world that you have nothing going on, which eliminates all of your leverage. Like in a heartbeat.
Interesting.
Now, it's the perception of leverage too. So you may have things going on and you may think it's a relatively innocuous thing to do.
Yeah.
But from the employer's standpoint, like, hey, someone's out of work, they're going to need to make money or they're not going to pay their mortgage. So odds are they're probably going to take my offer, right? So you've absolutely kneecapped yourself before you even got started. The other thing that folks tend to do is when they get in a new job, they hop on LinkedIn right away and they just shout it from the rooftops, which is a terrible mistake, especially if you have other opportunities in the pipeline or you accepted a job that you're really not that excited about, but you did need to pay the bills. Shame on you, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you need a job to pay the bills. Maybe you don't want to tell all your friends that you're working with a specific company quite yet, because there may be a better opportunity that comes in the meantime. And so eventually you will get pressure. Hey, why haven't you updated your LinkedIn? Oh, I'm sorry, I've been busy working, right? Whatever it could be. Too often people are too quick to post and then you can't backtrack from it. What happens if you get laid off in 3 months?
Yeah.
Right now, it looks like you can't hold a job, even though it wasn't your fault. So you've you've accidentally broadcast too much to the world and it hurts you later. That's
great. Boy, LinkedIn, quite a third rail in some cases. So let's talk about, give us another area that people often overemphasize or mistakes.
Comparison is the thief of joy. I'm going to use that to summarize this section. So when you are comparing your salary to the market and you're trying to say like, I'm worth this because of that, oftentimes there'll be folks that say, hey, at least get me a competitive rate. Well, the median, the average, the comp structures out there, that is by definition the 50th percentile. That is the median. So if you're under that, you're competing for what? Mediocrity, like to be medium. Are you medium? Or are you more? So if you say the market rate for someone like this is 300,000, like great, that's the medium. Some people make 500, 600, 700,000. Why not you? Right. So don't compare yourself to that number and say, once I'm here, I'm done. Right. And don't ask someone else to get objective criteria on your behalf, which is a negotiation tactic. Like, go find objective criteria and then find that for me. Great. Your objective criteria, you negotiated for average. Right. So you're not necessarily negotiating for everything that you could get in that particular context. Instead, we need to shift towards what value does this position bring to the company? How quickly do they need this value to be realized? Am I the right person for that job? Why are the other people not the right people for that job? Which will ask questions to eventually build a wedge between yourself and the competition so that the employer has only you as the solution. And then watch the number continue to rise from there.
Nice.
You'll see what happens if you're the only option and they're time sensitive and you're not. You're in the catbird seat, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely leverage. So how do you help people? That's one of the things that you help with is getting that clarity so that they can gain that confidence and that leverage to go in there. Is that right? Is that something that people really struggle with?
Often, yeah. And I think often people are hesitant to talk about their competitors when they're being interviewed. And they often position themselves in a me versus you scenario because they're not the number one candidate yet. So it's still me trying to prove my value to you. No, it's we need to prove the value of the solution that you're trying to put into the business, whether I'm the solution or not. And that's where people get hung up. So I'll give you an example of how to drive a wedge real quick, because I think this will be good for listeners. Let's say I'm a chief marketing officer. I say, have you considered hiring an agency for this? Why not? Oh, I don't like agencies. I don't want to manage it. They're a waste of money. They're this. Cool. One of their alternatives has been taken off the table. They just told you exactly why they don't want one of your alternatives. Cool. Have you thought about hiring someone more junior that's going to grow into the role?
Hmm.
Right? Have you thought about that? And they're like, oh yeah, I don't want someone more junior. I want somebody with, and then they just name off your experience. You're like, thank you. You're making this easy for me. Have you thought about 2 hires? Have you thought about outsourcing? Have you thought whatever the alternative could be for your position? You walk them through all their alternatives and they say, no, I want this. I want this. I want this. And then you go, what do you, and then they ask you like, what do you bring? And you're like, well, I bring this and this and this. And you just gave me every point I need to
Yeah.
sell you. And so you drive a wedge between all your competitors. Now you know you're not going to lose to someone junior. You might even say, why not pick someone more affordable than me just to build the illusion of value for yourself? And they say, well, we're willing to invest X amount in this. We need this to work. And you go, great, cool, because I'm not cheap, right? Obviously, I'm being facetious here, but you basically drive that wedge. And then they've talked themselves out of all their alternatives and you're the only solution. And they say, yeah, actually, we need to get started before the board member does another audit for the 3rd quarter or whatever. We need this person in bounds. Now you know their time position as well. So this is something you don't need to worry about the market and what they're paying the market. They're like, we need someone in this chair in the next 2 weeks. You're like, cool. And then you can drag your negotiation out to maximize that and hit their goal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can do there.
So asking questions, get curious so that you can really identify those pieces to build your case.
But what you're doing psychologically, Susie, is you're getting them to verbalize that you're the solution. And what happens is they're giving you the reputation magically. You're the solution. They're verbalizing it. And people psychologically need to be consistent with what they've said publicly. So if they said, James, you're the person, you're the person, you're the person, you start telling other people James is the person. And all of a sudden, James says, yeah, this deal's not going to work for me. Oh, shit, I'm
They're
the
in
one that
trouble.
lost James.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
They're in trouble. They're going to look bad unless they meet James' needs. Right. And I'm not saying James needs to be a prick about it and totally blow him out of the water and ruin like the relationship. What I'm saying is you get them in a position where you're more comfortable asking for the things that you need. And sometimes it's not always money. Sometimes it's other things.
Sure.
Like, hey, a severance would be really important to me. How am I supposed to risk my $1 million salary on this chance? Like, you need to take care of me, or retention bonus. I mean, we had a client get a $300,000 a quarter retention bonus for 4 years to not look for work.
Wow.
It's 1.2 million extra in cash just to be there for 3 months and not leave.
Nice.
So there's a lot of things that we can do depending on.
Well, that's really
the
interesting.
circumstances there.
Yeah, I think that changes the conversation, puts you in a more confident position, and really, I like that you're basically having them paint the solution, and that picture looks just like you. So that's incredible. But it seems to also lead to some concerns about how assertive can you be in this, and does that come into play on this topic?
Yeah, and this will come to the 3rd point, and Susie will keep me honest with time, and I tend to ramble, so thanks for bearing with me there. One of the challenges that we have is not acting consistent with your character from the interview process through to the actual job itself. Some cases, and Susie brought this up in the green room, sometimes folks are very assertive when they have this performance. They need to win the deal. Like, they're assertive there. Then the deal's closed. The work's not done. The work has just started. So if you're no longer assertive in the role and you don't know how to delegate and you don't know how to do these things, you're going to be in trouble pretty quick. You'll be out, which we see quite a bit. You'll see average tenure of C-suite be 12 to 18 months in certain positions, right? Don't let that be you, right? Instead, you need to plant the seeds in the interview process that you're assertive in what you need to be successful in that role right from the get-go. If you need a team, you better talk about it before you get into that role. If you need outsourced support, if you need to delegate, if you need access to the product team or the marketing team, or you need to be able to influence across the function, you need to say that in the interview process, not, oh, I've got the job. Oh, by the way, all of these other executive leaders need to bend to my will. They're going to say, you're acting at it like, why? This is basically a bait and switch thing.
Right.
And so you
It's
won't
not
be
what we
acting
talked
within
about.
character. And that'll slowly start to degrade your reputation at the company, and you'll be out the door before you know it.
Wow.
Yeah, that cultural mismatch from day one is a problem, right? You're going to be starting on your back foot. That's a really interesting time to set the tone.
And I have one point, Susie, if this is, do we have time? Are we good?
Yep. Yeah. 1 point.
Okay. So I often get pushback that it's very challenging for women to be assertive because there's a double-edged sword there. And I've been pushed back on this quite a bit. And sometimes the language they say is aggressive, right? Aggressive is the wrong word. When somebody says aggressive, What they should be saying is you need to be assertive. There's a difference. And so
Yeah.
Radical Candor is a good book for at least a gateway into how to care about people personally, but also challenge them directly so you
Yeah.
can be more assertive. And I will say that I have learned more from badass female executives being assertive than I have from the obnoxiously aggressive male executives that can kind of bend people to their will. Nobody
Yeah.
likes those folks, but they tend to get away with it. Women have that delicate balance where they must be assertive and carefully so. And that's where, look at the most badass female leaders you've seen. That's where you'll pick up the most tips on how to navigate the corporate environment more, I guess, tactfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's not taking on the persona of somebody else that's assertive. It's being assertive in your own persona voice, because that mismatch will cue something that's not quite add up.
It's
It doesn't
exhausting.
quite.
It's
Yeah.
exhausting to you put on a face for the interview and you have to hold that
Exactly.
face forever and you realize that's not
You
really
can't
who I
do it.
am. And to that point of not being consistent with your character, I tell my clients all the time, look, I don't want you to be a copy of me.
Yeah.
If you're not funny, don't be funny, right? I'm obviously hilarious, so I get away with
Yeah.
it.
I was going to
Right?
say,
James
gets
it's
away with it,
hilarious.
Right? Susie, it's a little rough for you, but that's okay. Right? But if you're not funny, don't be funny. Be yourself. I don't want you to be a copy of Jacob. I don't want you to be a copy of someone else. You can emulate certain tactics or whatever, but you want to be the better version of yourself, right? It needs to be natural and comfortable. So if you're doing a lot of stuff that's uncomfortable in the process, you're not setting yourself up for success, because you're going to have to stay consistent with what you've said. That's our brain telling us, stay consistent with that person
Yeah.
you showed up as, and it becomes exhausting and you lead to burnout faster and you're not happy. And that's not what we're going for.
Absolutely. All right. So
Yeah.
give us the 3.
All right. The 3, one last time. Don't necessarily overemphasize LinkedIn. Call a friend instead. If you feel like you need to change something to get a recruiter to call you, call a friend instead. Focus on your KPI should be conversations, not LinkedIn visits. Don't compare yourself to the market. Create the new market. Be the person that pushes it forward because you understand the value you provide, not what other people's value is and not what mediocrity is. And the last one, always act consistent with the character that you need in the role through the interview process throughout. And it's a lot easier for you to do that if you're being authentic to yourself, natural, vulnerable, funny if you're funny, whatever character traits you need to show, stay consistent with that so you're not bait and switching through the whole process.
Fantastic. Wow. Good summary. And 3 really great tips.
Yeah.
That's all 3 of those resonate with me for sure. And I know that our listeners are going to take those away as some real great action items.
Excellent. This was fun.
It was fun. And you obviously listened because you learned how to do that summary because James does it so well every time.
Well, Jake's got a big brain too. It's good people with a big brain, so it all works out.
Great. My ego needed that. I appreciate that. That's support.
Yes, I'm sure it did. Well, bring us home, Susie.
Yes, this was really, really helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here. Please follow us on LinkedIn. Message us and tell us what's on your mind. We want to hear from you, and we appreciate all the Quicksters in our network. So thank you for the support. And just remember, we appreciate you.